Welcome to the Times Jobs and TechGig boardroom discussions. A lot of you were asking me exactly what is it that is required. I just thought I'll give a little brief about what is it that we hope to achieve from this. See, basically, from the media, what we are really looking for is information perspective. That is really what we are looking for. When it comes to the industry, it is industry perspective regarding the trends, the skills, the challenges with regards to skills, the solutions that you are currently implementing within your company. What is it that you're looking for? Because that solution that you would be implementing is an expenditure. What is it that you're looking for from the target segment of your future hires? It could be experienced or freshers. That is broadly what we have been doing. Coming more specifically to boardroom discussions, we have been holding this for over 2 years now, and we have gone industry specific. The idea is to collect the kind of data, and that is where TechGig's expertise comes in. They collect the data and they are able to come up with numbers that indicates trends. That is one aspect of it. Then whenever this kind of information is uploaded on our, whether it's TechGig or TimesJob, TOI.com or ET.com, we have noticed a lot of traction that happens and a lot of interaction as well. We get a lot of feedback from the students, where do we get these particular skills. So that in turn actually becomes a learning curve. So that is why we hold a series of these discussions. Coming to this specific boardroom discussion, that is of course regarding big data. The idea here is to understand the industry, services, how much solutions, your applications, all that. Although everybody's talking about it in the industry, the target segment, especially the universities and the students, not much buzz is there. So what we decided is from TechGig and from TimesJob is to talk about it across all our channels consistently, so that we can build up on this and take it forward. The other thing that we have done with this is, instead of, before we used to go with HR heads, whereas now we have decided to take it to the next level and get in touch directly with the people who will be actually working. So that is really broadly what we would be doing. Avnish from TechGig, he's heading it. Avnish, you would like to add?
So I would first like to tell you a little more about what we do in TechGig. So TechGig is basically a technology platform, a community of people who work in the technology industry. And what we are trying to do over here is to build communities around specific technology skills, so highly engaged communities. And when I say highly engaged communities, what we're trying to do here is to first give a lot of information. So there's the entire learning angle which is there, which happens in the form of a lot of webinars which are done by companies where they talk about different skills as well as other projects which they're doing. There are trends and other reports from the industry as to what are the new technologies are coming in. Then there is this entire skill assessment angle which is there. So we do a lot of code hires and skill testing, so that people can then highlight themselves, because technology is one space where I think the measurement of somebody's ability is more quantifiable than a lot of non-IT industries. And then there is finally the learning aspect in the form of e-courses. So if somebody realizes that I want to be a good Java professional but I'm not yet there, then there are courses which are available which they can take. So and finally, through all of this, there is the recruitment angle which also comes out, because when you have a skill assist database, it becomes a little easier for organizations to hire people as compared to just hiring on the basis of a CV. So that is where we are as far as TechGig is concerned. And as far as the boardroom dialogues are concerned, so like I said, that there is this information angle which is very important for our users. So it's more so with new cutting edge technologies like big data and cloud computing and mobility, etc. So what we are trying to understand is both a macro view, and when I say a macro view, we want to see where is the industry today. So while everybody keeps talking about big data, so we want to get into big data. But I don't know, when I say I don't know, I don't think a lot of our users don't know where the industry is really in India today. So you read about all the examples about the Googles and the Targets and the other companies, Experian and all, what they're doing in the US, but we really don't know how much is happening in India. because that is what is going to determine how this industry is going to shape up tomorrow and the number of opportunities that are going to be there in this industry. And I think that is the question which people who are in the industry are best equipped to answer. So that is the macro view, and then the micro view comes in terms of what specific activities which you are doing, what specific challenges you as an organization are facing in terms of hiring people for this particular skill, what you are doing to develop that skill or to identify people who have such and such skills. And in the course of this, I am sure that there will be lots of other questions and insights which will come out, which will be useful for us. And we could also find opportunities to work together going forward on these skills. So that is where we are coming from as far as the boardroom dialogues are concerned. So I think we can kind of just get started by first asking you in terms of the basic question as to where we are in big data today. So while we hear a lot of action going on in the West, or rather in the US more so, but so where are we today? So what is happening in India today as far as big data is concerned? Or is big data part of like a digitization project and not big data per se? So yeah, so if we could, one of you could take the thread and get started on that part.
So I can specifically talking about India. Obviously this is a very new kind of a thing, you know? And it goes hand in hand with analytics. So analytics has not been old. I mean, it's kind of, you know, that's also relatively new. So I look at big data and analytics as two sides of the same coin. So from that point, if you look at, I mean, yes, there are a lot of initiatives in India, but we don't know whether it is mature to the level which is there in West. But wherever there's a lot of data that's collected, it could be banking or insurance or government, I mean, there is scope for doing a lot of work in big data, and that recognition is there in the first place. So what people are looking for is, you know, business-centric outcomes. I mean, is that important? That's very important. So what we see today in big data, in most of the Indian companies, is this concern about how can we deploy big data as new? How can we deploy it for customer-centric outcomes, operational utilization, and risk and financial management? I mean, 80% of the applications that you see will be somewhere on these three, tracks, is what I am seeing. But one is yet to see. Most of them are in the pilot stages. One is yet to see case studies, successes being reported in the media.
So if I can just build on that, I think big data clearly right now is in a hype cycle. Okay, let's at least let's acknowledge that, right?
Yeah.
Having said that, if you look at the journey of big data, right, in looking at what has happened in the developed economies, is that it starts with ingesting a lot of structured, unstructured data at high velocity, right, high volume and high variety. So I think that's where it's coming in, right? And there is a lot of work today happening at that level, which is about data ingestion, data management, and making sure that you are able to get all the structured and unstructured data in place, right? But then over and beyond that is the opportunity of looking at then that data to see how we monetize that data, which is where a lot of data discovery has to happen. And that's where the analytics piece comes in, a paradigm of discovering patterns, and then automating the math and the logic behind analyzing that data. And then finally it has to be consumed. It has to be consumed, and that's where there is a lot of focus around visualization and making sure that you are able to then disseminate that insight in the hands of the business user so that real time and right time decision making can happen. And I think that's kind of the journey that emerging markets have to go through, like India. I think that the opportunity in India is although we are an emerging market, we are also catering from a talent perspective to the global demand of big data, right? So from that perspective, we are in a very unique position to tap the opportunity and leverage the strength that we have around big data and analytics from a talent perspective, and really, see how we can then help India as an economy to benefit out of the big data, paradigm that is emerging today. So I think that's what would be my opening comments around this.
Okay.
So if I look at India specifically, and I think we spoke about creating the platform and whatnot. And if I take an example of what's happening in India, I think the biggest platform for big data is going to be laid in India. If you look at the whole Aadhaar initiative, the UID initiative, I think the amount of data that's going to be collected by the UIDAI, and the plans that they have in terms of making that available to all the organizations, whether it is the public distribution or now the Food Security Act or even compliance and security and whatnot. I think the opportunity is just going to be there to be grabbed. And as an society, I think this is a great opportunity because we are going to collect data about 1.2 billion citizens of India, and imagine the power that we will or the agencies would have to kind of leverage this information. The other area where I believe there is an opportunity, and I am not sure if anything is being done, is in the area of surveillance, and that's a very interesting area. And given the kind of threats that our country is faced with, and given the trails that people either leave behind or potentially can leave behind, I'm not sure if that's being analyzed. I think the central police, the central investigation agencies, the state police agencies, I have a great opportunity to leverage the so-called digital exhaust that people leave. Right? I mean, every time you do a transaction, every time you comment on a Facebook or send an email or whatever, or even make calls on mobile phones. I think all of this is something that constitutes big data, structured as well as unstructured data. I think it's a rich source of information that I wish our public security organizations start leveraging. I mean, there is obviously a concern in terms of the citizens' privacy and whatnot, but I think if security is a concern, then I think some of these will have to be made available. And I know that they do track when there is, for example, a bomb blast. They track CDR and call center data or customer the tower data, etc. But I'm not sure if it's happening on a consistent basis. And I believe that the opportunity is there, and these are two opportunities which probably are something that's going to impact the society.
And I believe the sector in India where I think big data can make a big impact is healthcare. Today, if you look at our healthcare sector in India, it's kind of very undermeasured. The concepts like patient satisfaction, or these are all things unknown to us. We don't even know if a patient, when and does a patient come back? What is the readmission rate of a patient? No hospital has a systematic way of measuring. But whereas this is a source where a lot of big data is available, in the sense that the kind of treatment data, the kind of patient experience, and and India is a place where healthcare challenges across levels is quite huge. And big data can make a huge difference. And that's also the space where companies big and small can actually get in. We don't have the concept of, for example, patient portals, where patients can go and start sharing their experiences. That's a big source of big data in the West. For example, you not only look at what is the treatment data available from the hospitals, but what patients are sharing about their experiences. And that is, many times we know that if patients having, let's say, a very rare disease, I mean, they would like to communicate not even to their family members, but people having the same symptoms. And online, if it brings them together, I mean, there's a rich source of data. I believe a lot of pharmaceutical companies and healthcare providers are tracking what these patients are talking about. Then that gives them a clue as to which treatment is working, which is not working. And then we get into the domain of unstructured data. So this is a place where in India it can make a huge impact if big data initiatives do come up in healthcare.
Now,
I do believe, I do believe, I think just a point that I think we were making earlier. First of all, we are in a global talent base, and the global bazaar is our market. So to that extent, I think the problem of big data and what we can do with it, like what Arnav was saying earlier, I think is a universal situation. So I think we should broaden our horizon to what the global markets need. I think in terms of what is the trend and what we are actually seeing, I don't really believe it's actually in a hype cycle. I think big data is probably one of the most promising areas that we see today, both from a technology and business perspective, and I think the opportunity is so large, and we have just barely scratched the surface. So I believe it is still a huge deluge of activity to happen. So to that extent, I think I don't think this will go through a hype cycle because the promise is so large that there won't be a hype cycle like we have seen in the past, is what I believe. So in that context, I think there are 2 or 3 things which probably we need to discuss as we proceed today. One is, what are the changed mindsets that we need to look at from a data standpoint? Because I think a lot of challenge that the universities will see, the students will see, and our existing talent pool will see is that we are wired to the traditional way of doing things. And what does it take to rewire ourselves? What does it take to rewire our courses in universities? What does it take to think differently in this world in terms of moving away from a traditional way of looking at structured data to now looking at variety of data and the huge volumes that we are dealing with, as well as more from how all it can be applied. Number one. Number two is, I think it also is something that we need to keep in mind, that the problem of the technology and business divide is hurting the most in this context.
Yes.
Because the promise is so large, and how do we actually help bring the constructs of mindsets from a technology and business closer together? That probably is something that we have to solve as an industry faster than before. That's the second element I think we need to talk about. And the third thing is, in terms of what are the immediate things, recommendations we can make in terms of how can we ease the pain in the short to medium term. That's probably two or three things I would kind of put on the table.
The thing is, you're talking about India, but there is data. Are you also targeting global players? There's a lot of BPO, KPO and data that is accessible today. Is that also something that companies are looking at? So are we looking at, I'm going to be addressing the domestic requirement for data analytics as well as for global requirements? Is there a market like that?
I think India is a very, it's in a very unique position. There are three different type of groups which you can see. There are vendors, KPOs, analytics providers. There are development groups, R&D groups of global organizations. And then there are Indian companies who are also trying to have a big data solution for themselves. Now, depending on who plays what role, unfortunately today the definition of big data itself is extremely different, the way people define, right? There are technical definitions around volume, velocity, variety, but I think there are people who will be defining it from the standpoint of how they want to position their own services or products. So from that standpoint, there is a huge difference in terms of what I call big data and somebody else will be calling big data. Now, in my mind, from my standpoint, what I call big data is more around making data available to me as soon as I want. Being able to connect the dots between different systems. And what's probably missing at this moment is using that to build applications which can really make impact. I think a lot of work, even be it in US or global economy or in India, we have seen probably a lot of work happening around getting the infrastructure ready. Probably also in the process of getting the data available to people, to a broader set of people. But probably what has not happened a lot is around making that using that information to be able to make impact. And that's probably many of those open issues which are coming in terms of is it really Hive, is it really a cycle which will go down, or does it really make an impact? I think as an industry we're all learning on how to use it, where to use it. Analytics had been there for a good amount of time, 14, 15 years it's in India, right? But big data, it poses its own problem in terms of technology, in terms of being able to deal with the variety that every day new data, how do I connect all these dots across different new data. And I think all of us are probably learning from that standpoint. Indian businesses, I have seen probably, I think it depends on where they stand in the maturity, but there is a lot of excitement. But again, they're also probably looking at what global economy is doing, what US is doing. And apart from some of the new age companies whose business model sits on top of big data, not too many big examples of success stories have really come up, and that's that's what is really going to happen in the next few years. Because I think it's very, very early stage of big data. We have probably solved the aspect of getting the data right, solved the aspect of making the data available, but I think it's going to be changing significantly in years to come, and that's where I think opportunity is there for everyone.
It's a point made by Vishnu. I mean, it's a really very significant point. Just talking about big data is a kind of world which connects between technology and business. It's like two different worlds. On one side, you have all this machine learning, Hadoop, MapReduce, all these kinds of Cassandra, Hive. That's a different world. On the other side, we are looking at, with so much of data, unstructured data, now we have the power to analyze unstructured data. What kind of business problems we want to solve? And it's not as if companies are coming and saying, hey, I have this problem, can you solve it through big data? They are saying, can you identify what I can do? I don't even know, I mean, I have a lot of data, but can you discover something for me?
Yes.
And that's where people can define their own problem statements and say, now that all this data available, I can do something. Just to give an example, one of the American professors, he looked at this problem of, airlines always optimize their price. They're looking at when you want to travel, and then they do all their calculations. But what from the customer point of view? I don't know what is the best time to buy, because I don't have any data. But he said now there is a lot of data available. He took the data from the public domain, and then he built an algorithm which will tell you as a customer when is the right time to buy a ticket for a particular airline. And I believe over a period of time, each customer was able to save about $50 on his ticket. And of course, it meant a huge loss for the airline industry.
Yes.
And finally, one of the big IT firms went and acquired that algorithm, which he built with his students, just with little effort, of 45 days of effort. They paid $100 million and bought that algorithm. It's Microsoft, by the way. So, and then they integrated into their solution. So I'm saying problem statements are out there to be defined. It's from the big data perspective, we need to go and find out what it is. So that way, most of the organizations today are doing a lot of education, exploration. So in that, we become a party. They come and tell, okay, what kind of pilots can you run? So what kind of big data roadmap can you come up with for me? These are the pressing problems. Of course, they define the problem, but we don't know what can be solved through big data. So can you come up with some kind of an approach? That's one way most of the IT services firms are interacting with their clients today. It's not a defined problem, but it's saying more of an exploration kind of a thing.
But I strongly feel that India is where most of the developments are happening. India is where most of the innovations are happening. Either probably as part of solving somebody else's problem, or as part of a global hub which is developing and innovating on the side of big data. So opportunity is certainly there in Indian market. So I think the maturity is there. The question is that is the maturity there in Indian businesses, who are installing big data solutions in their own business? Probably not as much as how we are enabling probably West to make it happen.
Yeah, that was actually my next question. Where exactly is India as of today? Are we at the high end, or a niche area? Where exactly?
So, here is my view of the world, right? If you look at it, in India, we serve as not necessarily a resource factory. It's like a talent hub to the global economy. Like we do the talent hub. That's one part of the world. The other part is there is a huge opportunity with the India market itself. If you look at it, every industry, it applies to every industry, be it in the government space with the Aadhaar project, or in every industry. Take into the telecom industry, you have over 1 billion devices in India, I believe, right? Now, after coming here, I learned a lot more SMS, texting here. Dana used to really pick up and leave messages back in the West. So a lot of SMS, a lot of text, a lot of call center data. And we know the churn rate is very high. I believe it's 86% right now in telecom industry. 4 years ago, it used to be 59%. So how do you keep your customers happy and increase this retain your customer loyalty point of view? Look at the historical data, trends, all kinds of information is available inside the corporation, and predict and anticipate the customer needs and behaviors, right? Similarly, banking industry, if you look at it, I believe there are 30 new licenses were granted by RBI. So there will be microfinance to women finance to every domain you can look at it. How do you now, what's my trust here? How do I give a particular loan or not to give a loan? ATMs, where do I place ATMs, where do I not place, what's the footprint looks like, how far apart should be, and there's an ATM, I believe it's very 10% today, I think some of the numbers I was reading in India, I could never even imagine in US that you'll get away with an ATM machine, whole machine, you'll run away. Apparently it's a 10% in ATM machines going away in India. So there's opportunity in every space. I think not just providing to the global economy from a talent hub, but also in India, I think it'll be a revolution. I mean, it'll be a revolutionizing in every industry as well as society.
If
I would believe, if you look at the industry, there are three kinds of people. The first one are the innovators, second one are the followers, and the third one are the laggards. So what we see, and each one of them demonstrates a different characteristic altogether. The innovators are the kinds who will, want to be like, a bank wanting to be the Google of bank. I mean, what they want to do is, they're saying that I'm sitting on a pile of information, whether it's my customer information, whether it's, the information that I'm getting from authorities or wherever it is. Now, how do I leverage this information and monetize it? Whether it is in terms of, making myself a superior bank in terms of customer experience, whether it is in terms of reducing the instances of fraud, whether it is reducing the instances of non-compliance and so on and so forth. They are constantly looking outside of their industry to innovate. To give you an example, I heard of this organization. It's a financial services organization. They bought a traffic management solution. Now you would figure out, why would a financial services organization buy a traffic management solution? The answer is interesting. What started doing with the traffic management solution is they started looking at the number of cars that entered and exited the traffic lot of leading retailers in the US. Not only did they get the the number, they also kind of looked at the kind of cars, whether they were compact cars, luxury cars, etc., etc., etc. And they did an analysis of all over the of retail stores across, for a particular retail brand or a set of retail brands. And using that, they were able to forecast what's going to be the comp sales of the retailer, not to the nth level of accuracy, but whether it was going to go up or go down and whatnot. And they were able to correlate the amount of traffic that came into the retailer store, and then figure out a correlation. I think that's a great example of where someone is completely innovating, shifting the boundaries of, shifting the goalposts, rather than thinking traditionally, saying, let me look at what is the sentiment, what is the press statement, what is the CEO saying, and so on and so forth. They went a completely different direction to do this. So you will see that there every country or every region are going to have these innovators. Every regions will have these followers. Now I'm sure with this as an example, there will be 10 other people who will try and follow them and say that this is a very interesting way of doing it. And then there'll obviously be the laggards who still kind of wanting to do things the traditional way, and so on and so forth. And if you look at people who are going to get success from big data at this point in time, I think they're going to be the ones who are going to innovate. They're going to really say, you know what, I'm not going to look for an industry example. I'm not going to ask what another bank did, or I'm not going to ask what another telco did. I'm going to ask what Google did with that information, or what an Apple did, or what an eBay did with that information. And I would want to use that as a model to model my organization or my analytical capabilities or my decision-making capabilities to drive business innovation.
So related to that, I want to bring in two dimensions to our debate. One is, what is the opportunities for big data? We know that companies are using it because you want to see what kind of business outcomes will come out of big data.
I want to stop here a minute, Mr. Srinivas. Are Indian companies, retail companies, telecom will be more open to it. But what about banks, hospitality, all the big brands? Are they open to it?
So I'll just make a
everyone can speak to that.
Yes. I think so it's not just the Indian companies. Companies around the world have asked this question, and I think if I can use the word of a good friend and a client of mine, we were talking about big data, and it was such a big word at one point of time, and he said, look, everybody is telling me big data is the answer. What is the question, right? And I think that is a phase that a lot of organizations are going through. So it is just not companies in this part of the world or in the emerging economies. It is every company around the world who's asking this question: what can I really do with it? Okay. So in that context, I think somebody made that point earlier on, is the context of your analytics has changed from a part of data to a lot of data. And in that sense, possibilities are huge. In that sense, your causal analysis becomes less important and correlations become more important. In that context, what questions can be answered, which is today unknown, can become very apparent in a few weeks' time, in a few months' time. So discovery is important, as you were saying. I think in that context, discovery is important. And in that, again, bringing that element to life, discovery, possibilities, correlations, what it means to business is where a lot of discussion needs to happen, or at least thinking needs to happen in terms of what can technology and business do together. Because traditionally what we have seen is, as technologists, I'm wearing a technologist hat right now, we have been tuned to building large data warehouses, programming solutions and so on, which takes months and months to implement. That's not the world we live in anymore. Because these events happen very, very rapidly. Correlations need to be built very quickly. You know, people need to be able to mix and match things, bring correlations to life, discover things, and bring it to an attention of a business stakeholder who can make decisions. That's a different world compared to what we were in until now.
So if I can just build on that, I think the imperative from what he's mentioning is that, and tying to your question, we talk about big data and the possibilities, and what is apparent from this group is that the business outcomes that we derive, is going to really help us realize the possibilities of big data, right? Having said that, if you become practical, there is a shift from the traditional world of looking at data warehouses, BI, and traditional analytics to more big data, real-time analytics. There is a very real thing around data privacy and data security, right? You are bringing in data which is unstructured as well as structured, data within your enterprise, data outside your enterprise. So there is definitely a big consideration around data privacy, data security. As you build the entire solution, right, from data to insights to action, how are we able to manage that angle is going to become very, very important as we try to scale and industrialize big data solutions. Today, if you look at the maturity, maturity curve of big data analytics, it's kind of going at a stage where people are experimenting, right? The examples that we are hearing in the room, there are definitely a lot of use cases, and business leaders are very excited with these use cases and the opportunities of applying big data. I think the challenge as well as the opportunity for practitioners like us working with industry business leaders is how can we then help bridge the gap, in terms of as we move from pilots and POCs to industrializing and scaling these solutions, the aspect of data, privacy, data security, what kind of data encryption practices we need to build in place so that, as we get into a more cloud environment, use analytics over the cloud, we all are becoming comfortable, right? And that's the change, and that's the paradigm change. And as we do these pilots, people are seeing the possibilities, right? So a particular mindset of saying that, I can't share this data, people are getting more and more open to collaborate and start sharing the data, right? And I think that's the other aspect that we are seeing around collaboration and getting together to solve a business opportunity, and it's a win-win situation for everyone involved in the ecosystem.
I think that's an interesting point about collaboration. In fact, I was reading about this organization called Data Without Boundaries. It's like doctors without boundaries, I believe. So there are problem statements that are thrown up. And anybody can come together, and a group of people can collaborate across the globe and come and solve problems. They're trying to solve some very esoteric problems like world hunger and probably the falling Indian rupee as well.
The concept of whole open innovation, that is actually the whole crowdsourcing open innovation, right? Is kind of becoming very, very alive in the world of big data. So today, as we are working with clients, we are bringing in academia, we are bringing in clients, ourselves, partners, vendor partners, and we are trying to see how we can solve that problem, because it is not about, just making a business there, but it's actually to your point, it can solve a problem that is, that is meaningful for the society, and that's where people are coming together.
I think that is the biggest.
There are two parties who are very important to this whole big data exercise. One is people who hold the data, what one may call as data holders, who actually have the data with them, what kind of, they are the owners of the data. So there are a lot of issues around stewardship of the data and things like this. And there are a lot of people who also aggregate data. I mean, that's true in, for example, in places like health information and things like this. So a lot of opportunities for new players to come into the field, take data from several data holders, aggregate them,